Welcome to Ken's Corner Podcast, Season 4.
Hi, everyone. My name's Ken from Ken's Corner, and I'm here today with Mr. Evan Ginzburg. Now, he's got quite the story. He started back at Madison Square Gardens in his wrestling journey and his super fandom begun. And I mean, it took you all the way to being an associate producer for the Wrestler. Amazing movie. I remember watching it. I love that movie. I think I've watched it 6 or 7 times myself, and also 350 days. We'll get to that stuff later, as well as your book. I really want to talk about that book that you wrote. That really intrigues me as well. But let's go back to your days on why you became a wrestling super fan.
I was a 12-year-old kid sitting at home one damp, nasty, rainy, Sunday, and I was bored. This was 1972. There was no internet, no cell phones, no video games, and I was bored out of my mind, and I accidentally discovered the mysterious UHF dial, this giant U on the TV, UHF. And I start fiddling with it, and there's all these foreign language channels and PBS channels, public broadcasting. And all of a sudden, I come across this monstrous human being pounding on this Indian. And I'm like, what is this? And it turns out it was WWF, and it was Chief Jay Strongbow. And this guy's pounding on him. And all of a sudden, Chief Jay Strongbow does this herky-jerky war dance. And I'm like hypnotized. I'm a kid. I think it's real. To me, it's like Marvel superheroes and supervillains. And all of a sudden, Strongbow's chopping the guy and he's pinning the guy. And I'm
As he did
out.
often.
Yeah, I'm marking out. And I made a mental note of when this was on. And my mother's telling me this is pro wrestling. And when she was a kid in the 50s, she went to see some of the guys I was watching in the 70s, like Killer Kowalski. And I just became hooked on it. And from there, I discovered the LA TV on in New York, the Olympic Auditorium with John Tolos and Victor Rivera, Hollywood Blondes, Greg Valentine, and the Florida TV tapings with Gordon Soley we saw in New York. And I was just, it was just like superheroes and supervillains for a kid, a mock kid. Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, you converted your love for wrestling and your passion into projects as I want to know a bit about the Wrestling Then and Now newsletter.
So in 1990, which is now 35 years ago, I was out of work. I had been a day school teacher with kids, and I was just trying to find something to keep me occupied, and I love wrestling, and I decided to do a newsletter. But rather than do the news, it was predominantly history. That's why it was called Wrestling Then and Now. And one thing always leads to another is what I found in this business. And from a modest newsletter on an old school typewriter, Xeroxed on a copy machine, a 50,000 watt New York City radio station, WBAI FM 99.5, very famous political station, but we were an arts program. My radio mentor, Fred Giabold, had grown up in the Midwest, and he was an AWA fan. He grew up on the Crusher, the Bruiser, Vern Gagne, the Vishans, etc., and Johnny Valentine. So he loved wrestling, and he said, why don't you come on? We'll do a wrestling segment. And I'm like, wow, 50,000 watt New York City station. Yeah, you don't have to ask me twice. And from there, we started actually inviting wrestlers on in studio or via phone. And during a 16-year run, we had on Lou Thesz, Vern Gagne, Killer Kowalski, Fred Blassie, Bruno Sammartino, Ivan Koloff, except like the biggest names in the history, Eddie Guerrero, Sherry Martel. I mean,
Amazing.
yeah, almost art bar. I mean,
Sounds like you're an early inventor of what I do for a living right here, a podcaster. That sounds like what you were doing.
well, yeah, it was a 50,000 watt New York station, but yeah, it was an experience and it was a joy. And sometimes I would be sitting up there and just like, wow, I'm talking to Ivan Koloff. This is one of my heroes. I'm talking to Bruno, and from there, once these guys, some of them actually came in studio. Johnny Valiant, of all people, and I grew up on the Valiant brothers, and they were huge, number one tag team in the world in the 70s. Johnny Valiant, out of nowhere, says to me, "Why don't you be my manager?" And I'm like, I've never managed a wrestler. And he meant shoot manager, like book him for comedy shows and indie wrestling and autograph appearances and
You
personal.
thought you were going to the ring.
Yeah. So I'm like, what do I have to lose? He's a great guy. He's a hero of mine. He's the funniest human being on the planet. And I said, okay, Johnny, we'll give it a try. And next thing I know, I'm taking him all over the country to do his comedy show and other appearances. And like I said, one thing always leads to another. And
Yeah. Well,
that's been
that
the journey, the voyage.
definitely that other, well, let's talk about it. The Oscar nominated movie, The Wrestler.
Yeah, well, I had Johnny Valiant and Nikolai Volkov as an agent. I started booking more people, Jimmy Valiant, Lanny Poffo, Nikolai Volkov, Nicole Bass, etc., so on. And so I had Johnny Valiant and Nikolai Volkov doing an autograph appearance at a wrestling store called the Wrestling Universe in Queens. And out of left field, the executive producer of the wrestler, and people get confused with these titles, the
Yeah.
executive producer is the money guy who
Oh,
gets the funding for a film. And his best friend comes in, Scott Franklin, the executive producer of the wrestler, his best buddy walks in and starts talking to us, and very gracious, down to earth guy. And he's like, "Do you know Darren Aronofsky?" And I'm a cinephile. I'm a movie buff. I said, "Yeah, Requiem for a Dream, Pi, 3.14, Pi." That was about a math genius.
yeah.
And
It's amazing.
yeah, I'm a big fan of Aronofsky. And he said, "Well, he's doing a project involving wrestling." And the guy said to me, "Quote, you guys would be perfect." And I said, "Hey, sounds good to me." So I hand him my business card. Months and months, maybe a half year go by, and I almost forgot about it because you're always giving out cards and networking and such. And all of a sudden, I get a call from them. "We'd like to meet with you. Bring whoever you feel would be appropriate. We're doing a film on an old school wrestler." And I said, "Okay." And I go to the meeting with Nikolai Volkov, his shoot manager, his real life manager, Nikita Brezhnikov, Johnny Valiant, Tiger Khan, who wrestled for the Hearts in Calgary, and myself. And we're meeting with Aronofsky, the screenwriter, Rob Siegel, the executive producer, Scott Franklin, who I mentioned, etc. And we're, Johnny was so funny, and Nikolai was so warm and gracious and telling road stories. They were both wonderful guys. They're both gone now, dear friends. And it didn't even feel like a business meeting. We're downing beers, we're laughing. It was hours and hours go by, and it was just like we all hit it off. It was like by the end of the meeting, we were like friends. And I knew, I said, this went well. And again, another 6 months or so go by because Aronofsky's finishing other projects. Then I get a call from Scott Franklin. He says, "Evan, I'd like you to be the associate producer, the quote unquote wrestling guy." I'm like, okay, we agreed on a fee. And next thing I know, I'm doing a half dozen or so casting calls. I brought in Necro Butcher, Romeo Roselli, Ron Killings, etc.
And you met the main actors in the movie as
Oh,
well.
of course. Yeah, yeah.
That's
So
Mickey Rourke. That's
yeah, Mickey Rourke, I never saw say no to an autograph or a picture. Very gracious and fan friendly and warm. And
I'm going to watch that movie again tonight.
oh, thanks. Yeah. So yeah, it was one of the great experiences of my life. And I was even reading the scripts from the beginning because they wanted me to make sure the wrestling content rang true. So, for example, in a very early version of the script, Randy the Ram blades himself, and everybody, all the wrestlers are watching. And I said, this wouldn't happen. It's another day at the office. Nobody would watch. Nobody would care. It's just another night out for these guys, you know, like Billy Graham and the Valiants and Wahoo McDaniel and Bruiser Brody and Abdullah. These guys bladed every night of the week. Nobody would care. So, so I I helped with. I didn't write. I just advised the screenwriter. This rings true. This doesn't ring true, wrestling wise.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was just a great experience. And Aronofsky, his mom was a New York City school teacher, and he wasn't a rich kid. He didn't have. It wasn't nepotism or cronyism. It was pure talent and drive that got him to the top of the film business, and nothing but respect for Darren. And we worked on this off and on for 7 years. People have no idea what goes into, you know, a quality film. I mean, Darren had me on the road with him, taking him and the crew for like 6 months to wrestling events, wrestling conventions. That tragic wrestling scene in The Wrestler, what happened, where that came from, I take them out to New Jersey for a convention, and it was the equivalent of the WWE Hall of Fame. There's Moolah, Mae Young, the Samoans, Johnny Valiant, Tony Atlas, Jimmy Snuka, Lou Albano, Nikolai Sheik, Iron Sheik, and there's nobody there. There were more wrestlers and vendors than fans. It was really pitiful. And Aronofsky kept saying to me, because he was a mid-'80s rock and wrestling, Hulkamania era fan. They all were, which is why they were doing this. He kept going, Evan, where is everybody? Where is everybody? With sadness in his voice. And I understood. The Iron Sheik's head was down on the gimmick table, asleep. That's how dead it was. And it was a sad scene. And next thing I know, Rob Siegel wrote that scene into the movie. That's how disturbing it was. Like after the glory, you know, that's really what that was. And if there were 2 or 3 dozen fans, there was a lot. It was nobody there.
Yeah. Well, and there would be millions of people wanting to witness that these days. That's for sure. It's definitely a classic. Actually, our next thing I would like to talk to you about, your next project, or maybe it's your next project, but along the line, you worked on a documentary called 350 Days.
Yes. Another Darren, ironically, Darren Antola, approached me about a wrestling documentary. And the title, 350 Days, comes from NWA champs, a Harley Race, a Ric Flair, a Dory Funk Jr., etc. These guys wrestled 350 days a year. They were never home. They didn't see their families. They didn't see their kids grow up. They wrestled Starrcade and, you know, Survivor Series and all of these, you know, Thanksgiving and Christmas. And it was a brutal lifestyle. And they wrestled in pain. And we had 3 dozen legends. We built superstar Billy Graham and Bret Hart as the quote unquote stars, but my God, we had Paul Orndorff, Ted DiBiase, Tito, Greg Valentine, George Steele. I don't want to bore you with a laundry list, but there were about 3 dozen legends in there. About half of them are gone at this point. It was released about 6 years ago, the film. And basically, at first I really said to myself, we're never going to top The Wrestler. I don't even know if I want to do another wrestling film, but I'm talking to Darren Antola from 350 Days, the executive producer, and he's like, man, I love Don Morocco, and wasn't Snooker amazing, and Orndorff was amazing, and, you know, we just clicked. You know, Piper, heel Piper, and we just loved the same guys, and I could see he's a blue collar guy who just loved the same stuff I loved. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. I said, but Darren, I said, I'm telling you in advance, I don't want to do the same movie that everybody else does. You visit the fan and he's got 10,000 action figures, or, the journalist is in the wrestling school and they're giving him an arm bar. I said, this stuff's been done a million times. I said, let these guys pour their hearts out. I said, make that the movie. And the editor, Michael Burlingame, he worked with, get this, Paul McCartney, Mariah Carey, and Sting. Not Sting the wrestler, Sting from the Police.
Yeah.
And I said, Darren, this is the guy. This is the guy to edit this, because he doesn't know the main event is from the prelim guys. He's going to pick the most heartfelt stuff because he's not a wrestling guy. He's not going to mark out this guy's a legend and this guy's, relatively obscure. He's going to, and I said to Mike Burlingame, I said, Mike, I said, make a movie that would make an 80-year-old woman who never watched wrestling cry. I said, that's the movie we want you to make. I said, the wrestling fans have seen 5,000 shoot interviews already. I said, move them with this film. Let's do a great film. And he had about 90 hours of footage that was whittled down to an hour 50. So again, this took 6 years to make. People have no idea what goes into a quality film. It's
dedication for sure.
Oh yeah.
I'm really interested. I read something in some of the stuff that you sent me, and some of my looking around at who Evan Ginzburg is, and I came up with you were a guest on the Genius Cast podcast with Lanny Poffo. Like, that's really cool. I'm a big Lanny Poffo and of course, Macho Man Savage fan. Can you tell me what that was about, and how did it go for you there?
I met Lanny Poffo in 1992 at the Sam Muchnick convention in St. Louis, and we just hit it off, and we were friends ever since then. And I acted as his agent, like many of the legends, and I booked him a variety of appearances over the years, including wrestling matches. He was still wrestling into his 60s, on occasion, but more autograph appearances and such. And Lanny would stay by me when I booked him in New York, and we really bonded. And my wife is from South Korea, and she would cook him healthy food, and he was very health conscious. And it was shocking when he passed. He was only 69. When I say only, this guy didn't put an unhealthy thing in his body, and we thought he would live to 100, just like Nikolai. And what I tell people is the wear and tear on these guys, the fans have no idea. Again, 350 days comes from how often these guys were working. Bret Hart told us as WWF champion, he wrestled 330 days a year, and Greg Valentine is the Intercontinental champ, wrestled 320 days a year. So imagine the toll that this takes on your body, on your family, on your psyche, on your marriage or marriages. Wrestlers hate the word fake. They hate it because they say, my hip replacement wasn't fake. My 3 divorces weren't fake. My kid's not talking to me because I couldn't make their graduation, or Christmas wasn't fake. And they hate that word fake. I've had wrestlers say to me, Evan, I'm always in pain. I'm always in pain. I mean, they have an expression. We only have so many bumps on our bump card until your body gives out. Gravity isn't fake. Just the other day, Drew McIntyre said, gravity isn't fake. When they throw me through the air and I land on the mat, it hurts. Quote, it hurts. And wrestling is presented, as these are superheroes and supervillains and sometimes even cartoonish. And you forget these are flesh and blood human beings, and it all takes a terrible toll on them after a while.
That's 100% true.
Hockey too. I can see you're a big hockey fan.
Yes, I am.
Don't think these guys don't take a pounding.
Oh yeah, definitely. They're warriors on the ice. So thank you for saying that. I know that you've written a really interesting book that I want to bring up so people can look for afterwards, actually, before we leave here. If you could give us your contacts and links and stuff that where people can find some of your material. Let's talk about wrestling rings, blackboards, and movie sets.
Thanks so much. I live in Queens, New York, and with the exception of China, we were the epicenter during COVID. We have LaGuardia and Kennedy airports and people coming from anywhere and everywhere. And we had 800 people a day dying in Queens during COVID. I had 5 friends die. And basically, everything I love, from wrestling to the schools I taught in, to the diner I ate in, to the gym, to the movie theater. Like I said, I'm a cinephile. Everything shut down. And I just said, I am going to go crazy. I felt like I had a ankle bracelet on me, like I was under house arrest.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah, and I sat down every day living like the writer's lifestyle. And I wrote over 100 pieces for this book, and I poured my heart out, and I basically told my life story, which involved many of the wrestlers that I was friends with. You mentioned Lanny Poffo and Nikolai Volkov and Iron Sheik, etc., so on. They were all in the book because I knew them and had, some close relationships with some of them. Jimmy Valiant, Johnny Valiant, Nicole Bass. I was on the road with a lot of them, and the good, the bad, and the ugly, the joy and the pain, the despicable promoters, the wonderful people you met along the way. And what I did not want to do was another book with, 20 pages on some inane WrestleMania angle or whatnot. I wanted to describe them as people and friends, and like right on my couch, Lanny Poffo, Greg Valentine, Johnny Valiant. You bond with people. You're traveling up and down the highways, and yeah. So
It's amazing.
and it's basically juggling 3 careers: wrestling, film as a producer, and teaching. So we waited 7 years to get paid for the wrestler. We waited 6 years to get paid for 350 days, and I always kept teaching. And I
That's
tell tales
amazing.
from the classroom as well.
You're
And
very inspirational, Evan. That's an amazing, amazing story. Where can we find some of your books, and how can people look up Evan Ginzburg?
the easiest, if you want to pick up wrestling rings, blackboards, and movie sets, it's on Amazon, or you could contact me through my Evan Ginzburg Facebook page, Ginzburg. I also have a Evan Ginzburg's Old School Wrestling Memories page. You could on Facebook. You could easily reach out to me there. I'm the senior editor over at ProWrestlingStories.com. We have over 1,000 pieces on the history of pro wrestling. And there's another film I did years ago. It's called Wrestling Then and Now, and Killer Kowalski,
Yeah,
Ron
I'm
Arnold,
sorry I didn't bring that up.
yeah, Nikolai Volkov's in it. We're actually sitting in the house with Nikolai. And let me say a little real quick about
Yeah,
Nikolai.
of course.
When he died, Bret Hart publicly said, Nikolai Volkov was the nicest wrestler I ever met. That's a quote. That's not paraphrasing. That's the exact words he used. And a lot of people would agree. Nikolai was the warmest, kindest, sweetest person,
And the
and
best hill.
an unbelievable heel. And Nikolai said to me when he and the Iron Sheik were on top, mid 80s, he said they had so much heat that they had to hide at Madison Square Garden in an ambulance, actually hide in an ambulance and be let out in the middle of the card, because if they left at the end with the fans at the stage door, they would have been murdered. That's the heat that these guys got. It was a different era.
Yeah.
Today, everybody's smartened up, but back then they wanted to murder these guys, and it was a different time. And people
Yeah.
forget. I started going to wrestling in '74. The first match I ever saw was Nikolai and Fred Blassie against Bruno and Strongbow headlining the Garden, and the Valiants against Dean Ho and Tony Gurria. And years later, as I was a kid then, if anybody said to me, one day Johnny and Jimmy Valiant and Nikolai would be friends of yours, I would have said you're insane. And
No doubt.
yeah, so your life plays out in very strange ways.
I've heard all these names from my father, and that's how I became a wrestling fan. Just his stories of the same wrestlers that you're talking about and what they meant to him growing up. So
Oh
thank
yeah.
you for bringing
And
that up.
and your father would experience what I did. People don't understand the mentality of fans of that era. This is pre-internet. The quote unquote dirt sheets were very primitive. They were mostly clippings and results. It wasn't so much the scoops and the inside stuff back in the 70s. There were fans, and we would send clippings to each other and review the local shows. But so back then, the audience was 90% marks, and we were blue collar, and in WWF it would be the Polish strongman Ivan Putski and the Italian Superman Bruno Sammartino and the Puerto Rican champions Pedro Morales and Victor Rivera, etc. So on. There was something for everybody. But you also have to realize that our parents, this is mid 70s, our parents fought in World War II, our fathers, and there's Waldo von Erich and Hans Schroeder and Baron von Raschke, and the heat was off the charts because, we believed, when Bruno was getting punched, we were feeling it. When Pedro was getting kicked, we were feeling it. And it was a very different mentality than today. Today, everybody's smartened up. I don't like the booking. This guy's getting pushed too much. These fans are coming from a real different place than we were 50 years ago. So
Yeah,
it was
100%.
magic. It was magic. Guys like Bruno, the Valiant brothers would walk, Billy Graham would walk down the aisle, Ivan Koloff, and the building would shake on sheer charisma. No pyro, no entrance music, nothing. Just guys in a pair of tights with charisma off the charts. And people don't understand that today. They would go, oh, back in the day, they were just punching and kicking, and they don't get the mentality of the fans. And
Yeah,
also how great these guys were, the psychology. These guys, like a thumb to the throat would get the reaction of like a Hurricane Rana today, or 37 high spots, because we believed it was a different world.
100%. Thank you so much. I'm sorry my time is running out.
My pleasure. Anytime,
Thank
anytime.
you so much for joining me. My name's Ken Judge from Ken's Corner Podcast, and today I'm here with Evan Ginzburg. Thank you so much, Evan. Do you have any final words before we leave today?
I'll leave you with this. The wrestlers, the legends, the pioneers deserve 401ks, pensions, health benefits. They do not deserve to go out needing GoFundMes and such. They never made the money that you would expect them to. Legends like Johnny Valiant would say to me, I never broke 100 grand in wrestling. And, these guys deserve better. WWE is a billion-dollar corporation, and
Boys.
Yeah, they should do better about taking care of these guys. It's a disgrace the way some of these guys go out needing GoFundMes to save their house, hospital bills to be buried, etc.
Thank you so much.
I'll leave you with that.
I appreciate that, Evan. You have a great day, and thank you for your final words.
Thank you for your support.